By the time they slid the termination notice across the conference table, the coffee in my hand was still too hot to sip, and Mandy, the CEO's niece, was busy blinking like she'd just discovered what HTML stands for. I stared at the clock behind HR's shoulder. 7:59 a.m. The room reeked of citrus disinfectant and cowardice. The CTO wouldn't even look me in the eye. We expect full collaboration during the knowledge transfer period. HR chirped, like this was a summer camp handoff and not a surgical extraction of my life's work. Mandy adjusted her glittery headband and gave me a smug little smile, like she'd just won a raffle she didn't enter. She can't code, I said flatly. No venom. No theatrics. Just a fact. A provable, repeatable, humiliating fact. The CTO opened his mouth like he was about to object, but HR cut in with their practiced, bloodless tone. This transition is non-negotiable. We're all on the same team. That's when I knew I was out. Not because they said it, but because they needed to. Mandy wasn't shadowing me. She was replacing me. Badly. I signed the form in silence, then handed them my badge. Still warm from my skin, the plastic clinked on the table like punctuation. Nobody said thank you. Not for 6 years of infrastructure, not for the platform that put their startup on the cover of Wired, not for the sleepless nights debugging during Series B. Just Mandy, twirling her stylus and chewing invisible gum, glancing at the laptop like it might start talking to her. I should have walked out then, but I waited just long enough to watch her open the dev shell, freeze, and mutter. Wait, where's the button thingy? And if you've made it this far, do me one favor. Like the video. Subscribe to the channel. It's free. It helps more than you think, and honestly 97% of you listening don't even realize how much that tiny click motivates the team to keep telling stories like this. Back to it. Security was waiting outside. One of them was new, tall, maybe 22, probably ex-military, definitely nervous. I nodded, walked past, didn't flinch when the badge reader beeped a denial as I passed through the turnstile. They thought I'd fight. Thought I'd yell or cry or beg for my job back. That's because they never read the fine print. 2 years ago, while the company was still debating fonts and pitch decks, I was in my garage most nights, writing logic trees by hand and drafting something a little more valuable. Patents. Not drafts. Not ideas. Filed. Legal. Mine. The logic core, the adaptive training module, and the compliance automation layer. All under my name, all built before their first VC dollar touched a bank. And no, I didn't use company time. Not a single minute. I knew then, when Mandy was still figuring out how to unzip a folder, that they'd eventually try to steal what I built. They wouldn't call it theft. They'd call it streamlining, centralizing, optimizing. And I'd be the roadblock, the legacy, the expendable engineer who doesn't scale. So I scaled myself out. Quietly, legally, thoroughly. As I stepped into the October air, my phone buzzed once, then again. A single message from my lawyer. Do you want to activate the clauses? I smiled. Because that wasn't a question. That was a countdown. I didn't bother clearing my desk. Just the essentials. The external drive I kept in my locker, the notepad with actual handwriting no algorithm could ever replicate, and a single framed photo from my first year with the company. Back when we were 5 weirdos coding on card tables in a converted laundromat, eating stale pretzels and dreaming big. Before the money. Before Mandy. The junior engineer, Sam, poor kid, hovered in the doorway as I zipped my laptop into its case. His mouth moved like he wanted to say something brave, something that mattered, but all that came out was a breathy, sorry. I didn't hold it against him. He was still green, still believing that loyalty buys protection. I just nodded. He'd figure it out, same as I did. Probably after they tossed him too, once his salary started to outgrow his title. Across the open floor, Mandy stood like a debutante at a funeral, waving her stubby little hand. Guess I'll figure it out, she chirped, then turned back to the monitor like she'd just been handed a magic lamp. I didn't respond. I wasn't there to educate someone who thought Stack Overflow was a type of breakfast. Outside, the air smelled like rain on hot pavement. My breath steamed just a little in the chill, but inside I was burning. Not with anger, with focus. Precision. Years ago, I learned that the loudest person in the room is usually the one who just realized they're about to lose. I wasn't loud. I wasn't shaking. I was ready. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. I didn't need to check the contact. It was my attorney, the one I'd hired quietly after our Series C, the one who helped me file the provisional patents while the rest of the company was too busy binging startup porn on LinkedIn. Text read, "Are you activating the protection clauses?" Short question. Long shadow. I tapped back. Yes. At that moment, the license clock started ticking. They didn't know it yet, but their access to the logic layer, the actual heart of the platform, was tied to my personal licensing agreement. An agreement that had a failsafe. Terminate me without cause, and the license lapses within 2 hours. That's not just code disappearing. That's infrastructure crumbling. That's predictive modeling reverting to base logic. That's millions of client dollars spent training AI modules that suddenly forget everything. I watched the light turn green at the intersection and cross slowly, breathing in like I hadn't in months. No meetings. No Mandy. No manufactured urgency from men who couldn't debug their own Outlook. Just silence, clarity, and a countdown they hadn't even noticed starting. Back in that glass coffin of a boardroom, someone probably just high-fived Mandy, told her how seamless the transition was going. But outside, in the cold and quiet, I was already miles ahead. And by the time they figured it out, I'd already built the next move. By 10:14 a.m., Mandy had already broken 3 things and realized none of them were her fault. The CTO was pacing the hallway outside DevOps like a man who just found out his parachute was decorative. Inside the main lab, monitors were spitting out red banners like ticker tape from hell. Top 1 read, "Error. Core module expired. Licensing token not recognized." Mandy, bless her clueless heart, tried refreshing the browser. Then she unplugged the mouse, as if that might coax the predictive engine back to life. When that failed, she opened Slack and typed, "Anyone else getting weird glitches?" The digital equivalent of screaming, "Does this look infected?" in a crowded elevator. Meanwhile, I was at a diner 2 blocks down, eating greasy eggs and watching everything unfold from my private console, secure, offline, and authenticated through my own LLC. A subtle ping blinked across the screen. Access token request failed. Origin mismatch. The system was doing exactly what I built it to do. Lock down. Fold in. Protect itself from anyone too arrogant to ask permission. Back at HQ, the CTO finally sent the kind of Slack message that makes junior engineers cry in the shower. Urgent. Anyone know what's happening with adaptive Node 3? Getting null returns across all prediction clusters. Sam replied, "Node 3 is tied to the logic layer container. Looks like the license check failed." Another dev chimed in, "Wait, wasn't that tied to redacted? S-build?" Then silence. Then the first domino fell. Someone in legal, probably Jenna, who once told me code doesn't need lawyers, started whispering about those patent filings I'd logged 2 years ago. Back then, they'd skimmed them like they skimmed everything. Missed the dates. Missed the ownership. Missed the fact that I didn't just write the code. I owned the skeleton it hung on. They thought they'd bought a racehorse. Turns out they were renting the track, and I'd just changed the locks on the stable. At 10:32, the platform attempted a background update. Failed. At 10:33, 5 enterprise clients logged critical errors through the customer portal. Downtime. Bad outputs. Corrupted logs. At 10:34, Mandy messaged the team. "Is this like a DNS thing or?" She never even opened the license management script. Probably didn't know where it lived, or how much of the system depended on it, or that it was tied to a grace period, 120 minutes post-termination. No extension. No warning. Meanwhile, I pulled out my old leather notebook, the one I kept during the original build, flipped to the last page, scribbled in pen. Day 0. Grace period expired. System performed as expected. They won't know what hit them until it's already over. And yeah, part of me ached. Not for them, but for the code. For the nights I stayed up rewriting the learning framework because the initial weights were off. For the weekends I spent stress testing deployment stacks while Mandy was probably binge-watching makeup tutorials. I built that machine like a cathedral. Every module a prayer. Every loop a hymn. And now it was frozen. Not broken. Just paused. Waiting for the rightful voice to speak again. By 11:06 a.m., Mandy had renamed the core logic script to final_2_ for real.py and tried to rewrite a single line, a basic trigger meant to initialize the self-training subroutine. Problem was she deleted the failsafe syntax with it. No linting. No tests. No idea what she'd touched. She just mashed keys, hit run, and crossed her fingers like this was Sims and not a billion-dollar predictive engine. And with that, the cascade began. First, the sentiment parser returned null across all verticals. Then the behavioral clustering module spit out raw weight vectors instead of labeled outcomes. Then the prediction logs began filling up with results like Party Popper Banana Whale Truth Sandwich. I'm not kidding. The engine actually said that to a Fortune 100 insurance client. In production. By 11:24 a.m., someone finally picked up a phone. The client, big legacy, the type with marble floors and 6 compliance officers per floor, called in furious. Why? The voice barked. Is your engine telling us a 67-year-old widow in Ohio is about to purchase 17 trampolines? The CTO, pale and sweating through his button-down, blamed QA. Said they must have missed something in regression. But QA had receipts. They pulled the Git log. And right there, in plain time-stamped code, was Mandy's commit. A sloppy overwrite with 2 missing brackets and a rogue emoji in the comment block that just said hope this works LOL. Then someone asked about the core author tag. And that's when the panic really kicked in. Because the core file, the absolute backbone of the platform, had an immutable author line hard-coded in the header. A signature I added not for ego but for audit clarity. It read, author, redacted, ownership, proprietary, licensed use only, IP reference, USPTO provisional hashtag 61xxxxxxx. And right under that, the date. Almost 2 years before their first VC injection. Suddenly, legal wasn't whispering anymore. By noon, the boardroom was lit up like a Christmas tree. Directors were flooding legal with questions they should have asked 2 rounds ago. Was this IP ever assigned? Do we have license terms? Did we verify contributor agreements post-Series B? The answers came back in various shades of oh god no. The CTO tried reaching the CEO. For calls no answer. Because of course, he was on his quarterly vision retreat, which is rich people speak for hitting balls into a canyon while your company implodes. His last text that morning had been a photo of a Bloody Mary and the words, New Day, New Deal's cocktail glass fire. Meanwhile, Mandy tried running a rollback. She Googled how to undo Git fast please. No joke, that was in the internal search logs, and then tried to reclone the main branch. But she used the backup instance. The one from a deprecated staging server. From 6 months ago. By 12:17 p.m., the system had triggered a recursive feedback loop between outdated modules and live production APIs. Meaning, it wasn't just broken. It was actively making things worse every time it tried to correct itself. Like a surgeon with no depth perception. Client tickets quadrupled in 20 minutes. QA stopped replying. Sam messaged the hashtag general channel. I think the platform's eating itself. No one laughed. Not even Mandy. And somewhere in all of it, between the looping error logs and panicked Slack threads, someone finally muttered what should have been obvious from the start. We shouldn't have fired the person who understood the damn thing. Too late. The cathedral was falling. And the stained glass had Mandy's fingerprints all over it. By 12:46 p.m., legal had moved past damage control and entered the frantic stage where junior associates start crying in bathroom stalls and paralegals get blamed for not owning a time machine. The firm's internal counsel, led by a guy named Brent who once told me, AI law is the Wild West, was now knee-deep in a paper trail they never bothered to read. Until the horse had not only bolted, but burned the damn barn down on its way out. They found the filings in a folder marked, Secondary Patents, Review Later. It had been sitting untouched in the shared drive for 18 months. Inside were scanned PDFs with my name on them. Not the company's. Mine. No co-authors. No institution listed. Just me. The first was stamped with a filing date that predated our platform by 14 months. The second was marked Self-Training Logic Core. Hybrid Module, Asynchronous Parameterization. The third was the kicker. Dynamic Compliance Scaffold for AI Frameworks. All provisional. All personal. All airtight. Brent's intern, some poor soul named Tyler, read through the first 2 pages, went pale and whispered, "These weren't done under corporate time." Someone else, probably the COO, muttered, "We funded the R&D, right?" Tyler shook his head. He noted each filing was written outside of business hours. Attached time logs. Even has a notarized witness signature from a coffee shop. They found the affidavit from a barista named Joe. Joe had signed off that I was in the corner every Wednesday night, scribbling into notebooks and muttering about stateful logic like a lunatic. God bless Joe. I tipped him 60% every week for a reason. That's when someone finally shouted it. He never assigned ownership. The room froze. Mandy was mid-sip on some lavender cold brew she'd Uber Eats'd while the company fell apart. She blinked, then gave a little shrug and said, "I mean, it's just code, right?" That was the moment Brent lost his mind. It's not just code, Mandy. It's the spine of the entire platform. It's the engine we pitched to Sandhill. It's the reason we're valued at over $1 billion. And it belongs to someone we fired this morning. Mandy pouted. "Well, can't we just, make new code?" A junior dev muttered. "Sure, give us 3 years and a miracle." The boardroom filled with the sound of everyone realizing that their agile pivot was now a cliff dive. No wings, no chute. Just a flaming PowerPoint titled Q4 Outlook tumbling after them. That's when my phone rang. Private number. I knew who it was. Outside counsel. The one they always called when things got legally nuclear. The guy who once laughed off IP disputes as just paperwork and posturing. He was probably standing in that boardroom now, holding a printout of my patent summary like it was a live grenade. I let it ring. Let it buzz a second time, then a third. Didn't answer. Instead, I opened my journal again and wrote, "Hour 5. Paper trail located. Panic confirmed." Then I closed the book, finished my coffee, and let them choke on every inch of red tape they'd ignored. It was no longer my system to fix. It was my silence they'd have to pay for. At 2:03 p.m., the big dogs finally woke up. Not the exec team. They were already in freefall, but the ones holding the leash, Venture Group 7. A fund so powerful they don't take meetings, they issue summons. Their senior partner, Corwin Lang, didn't bother with niceties. He just appeared in a hastily scheduled emergency call titled Urgent. Platform IP Concerns. That's not a meeting. That's a reckoning. Corwin's image flickered to life on the monitor in the boardroom. He wore a slate gray suit, and a look like someone had just spit on his money. Behind him, 2 lawyers stood in silence, eyes narrowed, hands folded. No smiles. No preamble. "Let me make this simple," Corwin said. "We didn't invest in a team. We invested in a product. That product, according to your own prospectus, was built on proprietary IP." A pause. The kind that empties stomachs. "So," he continued, "who owns it?" The CTO opened his mouth, but Brent from legal beat him to it. "We believe it's shared intellectual property," he said, voice thin and cracking under the weight of his own uncertainty. The development occurred during the early stages of the company's formation. While there are some overlapping dates. Corwin cut him off with a single blink. "Belief," he said, slow and razor-sharp, "doesn't hold in court. Show us the assignment documents." Jenna from legal, the one who once mocked my footnotes during compliance week, scrambled through a folder of unsigned forms. She held one up to the screen like Corwin was a damn TSA agent scanning boarding passes. "We have this." "Signed?" he asked. Her lips parted, but nothing came out. "Dated?" Still nothing. Corwin exhaled through his nose. Then he gestured to the associate behind him, who tapped a few keys. A new window popped up on the call. A simple digital display with a heading that said, "Patent Summary Report, Adaptive Logic and Compliance Framework. Filed, 22 months prior to seed round. Owner, redacted. Assignment, none on record. Licensing status, expired at 10 a.m. EST. There it was. My name. On screen. Stark and unavoidable. Nobody spoke. The CEO, still missing in action, had delegated the call to the CTO. Poor bastard looked like he wanted to crawl inside the Ethernet cable and disappear. Corwin's eyes didn't blink. So let me recap. You fired the only person with legal ownership of the software running your core platform, then tried to replace them with an unqualified relative, without securing an IP assignment, without maintaining licensing. And now, you're surprised it's not working. Brent swallowed. We didn't think. No, Corwin cut in. You didn't. He turned to his associate. Prepare a freeze recommendation for the remaining tranches. Gasps. That meant no more money. Not a dollar. Not a lifeline. Just a slow suffocation by fiscal asphyxiation. Then, for the final twist of the knife, Corwin said, "You'll need to negotiate with the patent owner. Directly. We won't mediate." The call ended without so much as a goodbye. Back in the diner, I saw the notification light up on my backup console. The video feed had been mirrored quietly through a watcher node I'd installed during our last product demo. Not to spy, just to be ready. There it was, frozen on the last frame. My name. My ownership. Their mistake. I didn't smile. Didn't pump a fist. I just closed the console and scribbled one more line into my notebook. Hour 7. Confirmation achieved. Investor recognition secured. No further bluffing possible. Let them sit in that silence. Sometimes power doesn't need to roar. Sometimes it just waits and lets its name be enough. At 3:42 p.m., my phone finally rang with the tone I'd assigned months ago for the CTO. A dry little buzz labeled damage control. I let it ring twice before answering, mostly to remind him he didn't have access to me anymore. When I picked up, I didn't bother saying hello. His voice came through low and strangled, like he was speaking from inside a pressure cooker. "Look, we know things got out of hand this morning, but we want to make this right. Please. We can negotiate." The word please from his mouth hit different. This was the man who once told me during a sprint review that visionaries don't need sleep, just results. Now he was choking on consonants, trying to find ground he'd already burned to ash. I didn't blink. "What's the current license bid?" Silence. Dead, breathless silence. He stopped, reset. "You're charging us?" My voice stayed flat. I wasn't angry. That part had burned off somewhere around noon. What remained was cooler. Sharper. The kind of clean precision you get after filing sharp edges. "That," I said, "or unplug it." He let out this weak, breathy laugh like he couldn't quite believe I wasn't bluffing. But then his voice dropped to something quieter, defeated. "We don't have a process for this." "That's not my problem." I hung up before he could stammer out another line of fake camaraderie. Then I pulled up the invoice template I'd prepared weeks ago, titled, "Emergency Reinstatement, Non-Assigned Proprietary IP Licensing Agreement." I filled in the blanks. License, Adaptive Logic Framework. Licensee, Redacted Company. Status, Retroactive Activation. Effective date, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time today. Term, rolling quarterly. Rate, $2.1 million USD per quarter. Due upon receipt. Sent it. Plain and clean. PDF format. Subject line, license access terms, immediate action required. No emoticons. No threats. Just business. Within 90 seconds, I saw the email open. 4 minutes later, it had been forwarded to legal, to the board, and ironically, to Mandy, who I'm guessing was still clicking through Stack Overflow wondering why every function she touched melted on contact. They didn't realize I wasn't the backup plan. I was the plan. The logic layer, the compliance wrapper, the pre-trained recommendation engine. None of it functioned without the structure I owned. They didn't just fire an engineer. They fired the foundation and expected the windows to stay up. At 4:06 p.m., I got a bounce back from their payment portal. Too many hands trying to log in at once. I jotted another line in my notebook. Hour 8. Offer made. Leverage confirmed. CTO compromised. I wasn't mad. I wasn't even smug. This wasn't revenge. It was rent. For the house they tried to steal while I was still living in it. By 5:11 p.m., The emergency board session had devolved into a corporate funeral with catering. The projection screen still showed my licensing invoice, blown up to full screen like a ransom note in Helvetica. Half the board hadn't even finished reading it before someone moved for a vote of temporary leadership suspension, phrased, of course, as executive repositioning during transitional restructuring. Translation: the CEO was out. Not fired, just faded. Like a watermark. No more golf retreats. No more mojitos at product launches. Just a polite statement from the board. Effective immediately, the CEO will step aside to support operational realignment. Which meant he blew it. He let his niece, who was now amusingly being reintegrated into internal people strategy, demoted to HR, crash the very system that got them their Series C. Turns out even billion-dollar dreams need documentation. And Mandy, bless her little unicorn sticker laptop, didn't know what a for loop was, let alone an IP clause. Legal, now hollow-eyed and running on vending machine coffee, started drafting what can only be described as a professional love letter. A rehire package addressed to me, wrapped in desperation, tied with an NDA, and stuffed with equity like a corporate turducken. Base salary reinstated. Bonus doubled. Back pay. A new title. Chief Innovation Officer. As if slapping a crown on my head would make me forget they tried to guillotine me before breakfast. It wasn't personal. Not anymore. That's what made it worse for them. At 5:37 p.m., Venture Group 7 issued a statement to TechCrunch. We support the protection of foundational IP. Ownership matters. Accountability matters more. That single line triggered a chain reaction. 2 mid-tier firms froze their pending capital rounds. A government client flagged the platform as temporarily unstable. And Mandy, for all her daddy-funded bravado, was spotted quietly removing her framed, employee spotlight, certificate from the kitchen wall. And me? I didn't answer their email. Didn't call anyone back. I opened LinkedIn, clicked post, and typed a single line. Building new things. My code knows who raised it. No hashtags. No photos. Just signal. Within minutes, the post started spreading. Engineers reposted. Lawyers DM'd. A recruiter commented, legendary. Sam, good kid. Left 3 fire emojis and a gif of a phoenix. I smiled. Not because I needed validation, but because the silence finally echoed in my favor. I didn't gloat. I just watched. Watched the company try to rebuild a bridge I burned with their own matches. Watched the market shift ever so slightly, not in numbers, but in awareness. They wanted to own the work, not the worker. And now they had neither. At 6:42 p.m., I sat alone in my office, not the old glass one with the buzz and badge scanner, and someone else's name on the wall, but the new one. Mine. Quiet. Unshared. Walls painted in matte charcoal, the kind that eats glare and lets the light fall clean. There was no startup clutter, no whiteboard of faux inspirational quotes. Just a single walnut desk, 1 laptop, and a freshly printed licensing contract waiting on the screen. 3 years. $9.4 million. The amount had been settled without a single phone call. They knew better now. Their legal team didn't even pretend to haggle. The contract came through from a firm I respected. Not the clowns who tried to bluff belief into ownership, but people who understood the value of silence and signatures. It was clean, tight, and respectful. Just like the system I'd built. The terms were simple. Full operational license, quarterly audits, revocable with cause. Use it, don't abuse it, and pay for what you rely on. No equity. No job title. No office invites. Just the line that mattered most. This license agreement recognizes the sole IP ownership of Redacted, founder of new company name. I picked up the stylus. No ceremony. No speech. I signed. 1 stroke. Then another. Loop closed. I turned off my phone after that. Not out of drama, but peace. No more alerts. No more Mandy memes or board-level begging or the CTO's cracked voice trying to sound collegial after gutting my livelihood. Just the stillness of being on the other side of a war I never declared. On the screen in front of me, the dashboard refreshed. The AI platform blinked awake. Modules online. Logs cleared. Training resumed. And in the bottom corner of every panel, right above the metrics and status lines, sat a new watermark, soft gray, unintrusive, but unmistakable. Licensed by new company name. Proprietary logic framework. No branding flerist. No aggressive stamp. Just proof. Proof that I hadn't just written the code. I'd written the rules. And when they broke them, they learned what it really meant to push someone out without understanding what they carried. Final line. Voice steady in my head as the system hummed back to life. They fired me at 7:59. By 9 o'clock, I owned them. Loop complete.